What's up, guys? Welcome back to another edition of Capital Claims TV. Like, subscribe, talk to me for all your insurance needs or insurance understanding. Today, I wanted to talk about the templated culture in our industry. And again, I don't think that using templates is like inherently unethical, but when using templates becomes like a huge part of how decisions are made, I think this is where some of the problems start happening. Templates don't allow claims to be, for example, like it reduces the individual or individualized analysis of a claim, or it increases the denial frequency, not to even mention the erosion of public trust. So I believe that insurance is not supposed to be a script. It's supposed to be a promise. That promise requires attention to the individual facts of every loss so that every claim get its proper attention and evaluated properly to come to the right determination. So number one, let's talk about the assembly line model of handling claims. Carriers have thousands and thousands of files simultaneously, and to manage the scale, they have to build these standardized language banks of denial paragraphs, reservation of rights, wear and tear explanations, storm created opening, or no further review warranted. So the standardization of whatever they do, I don't think it's evil, it's operational efficiency. So we get that from that perspective. But the big problems is these templates replace analysis. So people are not looking at the claim for what it's worth or what it could really be. So now this is where we believe that a lot of the dysfunction starts to take root, because I believe that the templates are supposed to fit the facts. What I believe is going on is that the facts are being forced to fit the template. So when you studied enough or you've seen enough of these denial letters, then you start to realize or start putting together and seeing the pattern, the language pattern. We observe no evidence. The damage appears to be consistent with, possibly occurred prior to. The exact loss date could not be determined based on the terms and the condition of your policy. So you start noticing those things. So when you start hearing those things, or you've been hearing those things for a while, you realize like that's not an investigation, that's a narrative management, right? They're managing the narrative. So think about the psychology of some of these boilerplate templates, what it sounds like to the average insured. To them, it could sound like, oh, the way this letter is written, it perceives that this is the finality of the claim. Or it's for people that don't do this every day, the language could be overwhelming, because the average policyholder could be reading this or reading a denial letter and then just say, man, all of this sounds official. The way they said it, it all sounds official. They cited some stuff in the policy that I've never read or don't even understand. But what we have to remember and understand, claims require specificity. So it has to be specific. Did they address specific evidence that we provided? Did they respond to the engineer I submitted? Did they inspect all slopes? Did they test the ceiling strips? Did they only rely on satellite imagery? So all these questions that we're asking, templates rarely address any of those questions or answer any of those questions. Also, this is a good one, the industrialization of the wear and tear. That's one of the most common templates that we always see. And that one normally goes in a pattern like this. The roof is X amount of years old. There was granular loss present, therefore deterioration, therefore the exclusion applies. So that we're on the same page, or we all understand, age does not negate storm damage. A 15-year-old roof can experience sudden uplift. A 20-year-old roof can lose adhesion. It can. So a policy exclusion for deterioration does not erase coverage under a covered loss or a covered peril, even though the system or the roof may be aging. And so this is what we're talking about when we're talking about these templates, right? Because real causation analysis requires pre-existing condition, storm-induced failure. That's engineering, not a paragraph insertion, not a template. Some of the templated culture or some things we find is the burden shifting. Here's one. We find no evidence of storm created opening, and that kind of shifts now the burden of proof to the policyholder. Now you make the insured have to prove coverage like to a forensic certainty. That's not how it's supposed to work. But hearing this repeated language starts normalizing in the improper standards that sometimes are being used. And I'll give you this last one and I gotta go. The data problem. when speed replaces the depth. So carriers measure adjusters on file close rate, cycle time, reinspection ratios. Templates reduce drafting time. Drafting time increases closures. Increased closures improve metrics. Metrics influence bonuses. Now you can kind of see how these templates play a role in adjusters being incentivized. Again, I don't think it's malicious. I just think that it's all just systematic. So the efficiency pressure can really quietly compromise the depth of an insurance claim. So then how do you identify and know when you're dealing with templates and the uniform language across different claims? If you handle enough claims or you deal with enough claims, then you start to notice something super unsettling when you're dealing with these claims. You start noticing it's a different property, different storm, different adjuster, but the same paragraph. So how you start to spot these red flags: identical sentence structures across multiple denials, the same explanation on the exclusion, regardless of the type of roof, regardless of what happened, the same no storm created opening on a tile, metal, or shingle roof, the same engineer conclusion, even when the damages differ, even when it's two solely different things, you start looking at the same engineer conclusions. So claims should be always driven by the facts, not templated by categories or category driven. It should be solely driven by the facts. And again, if causation is uncertain, then the investigation is incomplete. So if nobody can get down to the bottom line of what caused this, or causation is possibly prior damage, then the investigation is not complete. It should be a reasonable investigation on what happened on the loss. And what we've come to learn and come to find out in all the claims that we work, when there's conditional language that produces a definitive denial, then we know we're dealing with a template. We know we're dealing with some kind of boilerplate logic. Somebody's just pushing back, see if you'll push forward. So some of the things that we do on our side, we just ask real questions. Identify the exact shingle. So many times we get an estimate back from a character where they say it's 6 damaged shingles. It's 1 damaged shingle. Okay, identify that shingle so we can know what it looks like. What do you consider damage, or what you're saying damage is? Because this is super important and super powerful, because templates struggle when you ask for specifications. See, they can't fit a template when you're asking for them to specify something. So that's super important. Asking specific questions puts the template in a position where it's going to struggle, where somebody has to look at that claim, because at the end of the day, you want somebody really looking at the claim, really doing an analysis, really doing an investigation as you're doing your investigation to really prove the loss. So in the grand scheme of things, the bigger picture, the bigger principle is that people using templates or carriers using templates, it's not about lazy adjusters or people not wanting to do their job or people not wanting to do things that they were hired to do. It's all by design. It's system design. We understand that large carriers want to optimize on consistency and efficiency, but insurance is a promise tied to a individual loss event. So when the efficiency takes over the individuality of the claim, now this is where you start getting a ton of dysfunction. Thank you for checking out CCG TV. Like, subscribe, share this with somebody. Thank you again.